Hello everyone. On today's edition of Varineau's Voice, I'll be talking about Samuel Barber's Adagio for strings, Joan Tower's Chamber Dance, and Beethoven's Piano Concerto No. 4. Stay tuned! Barber's Adagio for strings is a serious piece of music that is firmly embedded in the consciousness of nearly every American. Those who are old enough will remember that it was broadcast when John F. Kennedy died. More recently is its use in the film Platoon. When Americans need to express their grief, they turn to Barber's Adagio for strings. It got its start due to the efforts of one of the great conductors of the 20th century, Arturo Toscanini. In the late 1930s and 40s, Americans eagerly awaited his live national radio broadcasts on NBC. Samuel Barber met Toscanini almost by chance while he was a student in Italy. Barber and his friend Giancarlo Menotti went to the island of San Giovanni to visit Mrs. Toscanini. She was not available, but Arturo himself received them and proceeded to entertain them for the entire day. A friendship developed, and eventually Toscanini informed Barber that he would like to perform one of his works. It took Barber 3 years to write something that he felt Toscanini would accept. It was his first essay for orchestra. Along with that work, he sent an arrangement for a 5-part string orchestra of something that he had written in 1936, the slow movement from his string quartet in B minor, what we now call the Adagio for strings. Toscanini sent them both back without comment. Barber was too nervous to approach Toscanini himself for a verdict, so he sent Menotti by himself. Menotti explained that Barber couldn't come because he wasn't feeling very well. "I don't believe that," remarked Toscanini. "He's mad at me." "Tell him not to be mad. I'm not going to play one of his pieces. I'm going to play them both." The reviews of the November 5, 1938 broadcast were great, and ever since, Barber's Adagio has justifiably become one of America's great orchestral works. Aaron Copland said, "It's really well felt. It's believable, you see. It's not phony." The composer William Schumann gives a wonderfully concise listening guide. It's so precise emotionally. It begins, it reaches its climax, it makes its point, and it goes away. Joan Tower spent her childhood in South America, where her father was a mining engineer. In an interview with Brenda Sokolowski, she explained, "South America is a dancing culture, and also if you're in the Catholic areas, they're celebrating every Saint's Day, which is about every 3 days. My nurse was a young Inca woman looking for a man. She dragged me to these festivals and tossed me a percussion instrument to get rid of me. I had a ball. I'd be playing maracas and castanets. That started a real love for percussion, for dancing, for rhythm. My music is basically rhythm. The action is the rhythm. In my orchestra music, it's all over the place." After returning to the United States, Joan studied at Bennington College in Vermont and then Columbia University, where she received her doctorate in 1968. She is the first woman to receive the prestigious Grawemeyer Award and the first composer to be commissioned by the Ford Made in American Consortium Commission. She is currently Asher Edelman Professor of Music at Bard College. Tower wrote Chamber Dance on commission from the Orpheus Chamber Ensemble. That New York-based orchestra is famous for performing without a conductor, and having conducted a performance of this piece, I have to say I can't imagine how they did it. It is so complex. This is what she has to say about the piece. It is chamber music in the sense that I always thought of Orpheus as a large chamber group, interacting and dancing with one another the way smaller chamber groups do. Like dancers, the members of this large group have to be very much in touch with what everyone else is doing and allow for changing leadership to guide the smaller and bigger ensembles. Chamber dance weaves through a tapestry of solos, duets, and ensembles where the oboe, flute, and violin are featured as solos, and the violin and clarinet, cello and bassoon, two trumpets, and unison horns step out of the texture as duets. The ensemble writing is fairly vertical and rhythmic in its profile, thereby creating an ensemble that has to dance well together. What is it about the music of Beethoven that sets it apart? It lacks the elegance and accessibility of Mozart or the humor of Haydn. But he was the first composer to put his personal struggle, misfortune, suffering, triumph, and peace into his music. It is intensely personal music, while at the same time universal. By the time he completed his fourth piano concerto in 1806, Beethoven was aware that he would soon be completely deaf. He had nearly abandoned performing in public and was making his living almost entirely from his compositions. In spite of his deafness, Beethoven was the soloist in the first performance of this concerto at a private concert in the palace of his friend and patron, Prince Lobkowitz. 2 years later, Beethoven gave a public performance of the concerto that also included him conducting the premieres of his Fifth and Sixth Symphonies, a concert aria, parts of his Mass in C, and the choral Fantasia. It was a long, long concert, and word has it that the heating was broken, so it was cold. By now, Beethoven was completely deaf. The orchestra revolted against his seemingly incompetent conducting, and the soprano for the aria had stage fright. The concert was a total disaster, and the concerto never really gained audience acceptance for the rest of Beethoven's life. The person responsible for reviving it was none other than Felix Mendelssohn, who presented it to enormous acclaim in 1836. Unlike Beethoven's other piano concerto, this one has an intensely introspective character. He has refined the role of the soloist throughout, particularly in the first two movements. The first movement doesn't begin with the usual long orchestral statement of the theme. Instead, the piano starts with a questioning phrase. Then the orchestra answers and proceeds to introduce the main themes, followed by the soloist. In the second movement, the orchestra begins forcefully and the piano answers timidly. Only after persistent provocation does the piano respond in kind, and then only for a moment, before receding into a sort of dreamlike fantasia. Without pause, the third movement of the concerto breaks in with a more traditional, spirited finale.